Good morning, Jess. So I understand that, we all know that most real estate agents want to win more listings, but not many of them have a system that's consistent with doing that effectively. Can you tell me a little bit about your listing presentation accelerator?
Yeah, Kath, it's one of our systems that we talk about that I think the big mistake that a lot of agencies make out there is when they're thinking of listing presentations, they're thinking of just the meeting itself. So our system is broken into three core components. What happens beforehand, what happens when they're actually at the property, and what happens afterward if they don't win the business there and then. And we make sure that everyone understands that I talk about that there's a 25% impact of what happens beforehand, 50% impact of what happens when they're there, and 25% is afterwards. And it's making sure you understand all the core pieces of that.
So can you give us an example of somebody that you've walked this through and how it worked for them?
Yeah, we've got a really good client we work with up in New South Wales, Andrew Didak, and he works for Stone Real Estate. And when he came to us, he worked with us back a few years ago, and he tracked and measured all his KPIs. And as a coach and looking at someone's business, it was very quick for me to be able to look inside his business. He had a huge volume of listing presentations, but a really low strike rate of actually winning the business. So I said to Andrew when he first came to our program is that this is not about increasing volume, this is about improving quality. And this system we teach breaks that core component down, and he's able to do less listing presentations, but he's now converting more business.
Amazing. And so what are some of those key components in the accelerator process?
Yeah, I think for me, even though I talk about 25% of what happens before we get to the property, for me, I even place probably more importance for that. And I think a lot of businesses will book in a listing appointment. And I talk about some of the core problems they have with that is they're not organised, they turn up late, they have no information, they get to the client prior to going, and they're turning up trying to showcase what they're about as a business. And my belief is that a listing presentation should be about the client and not about the agency. I think that's the part that we try and position before we get to the property. Tell them about you, tell them what you're good at. So we have a process we talk about what happens around that, and also making sure that, and I say this with businesses all the time, if you don't feel like you're great at listing presentations, and I was one of those people when I was in sales myself, this process allows you to almost pre-qualify your client before you get there. So that when you get to the point of sitting down with them in their kitchen, having a conversation, it's about what's important to them rather than what's important to you.
And with Andrew, so you've spoken briefly on the results that he saw, but could you take us through sort of any aha moments for him in the learning journey and then some of the bigger results at the end?
Yeah, well, he talked about, just recently we had a conversation about the impact of what he's been doing prior to getting to the property, and you can now see how much of an impact that's having to winning more business because he's creating effectively a point of difference over his competition. And that's the thing that I say to people all the time. So the moment you get off the phone, he's now looked at it like, I'm booking an appointment in within 60 minutes or 2 hours. We want to be able to position our offering of what we're about and pre-interview our client at their front door. So we get some information to them, we allow them to add the questionnaire. And people say to me all the time, why is that a big point of difference? And my simple answer is that very, very few people do it. So all of a sudden you're creating a wow experience for your client that your competition's not creating. And Andrew's talked about how much of an impact that's made to his ability to be able to make listing presentations so much easier.
And on that note, what are some of the results? So before you said he had a lot of volume, but not a lot of conversion. Can you give me some numbers, the stats?
Percentages. I think when he first came back to us 6 months ago, his conversion was around about 30-odd%. He's now taken his listing percentage strike rate up to over 50% in the space of 3 or 4 months. This core project we've been working on. So there's clear evidence to say that he's now slowed things down a bit, taking our system on board, making sure he's implemented the steps, and his percentage has gone from 30 to 50%.
And I assume there's still more room to grow even within that. That's not the ceiling.
Absolutely. Well, I'm still talking about 50%. So he can, and I'll say this to him all the time, is it's not about, some parts of your business require volume. I believe a lot of people out there watching this now is if you measure your listing presentation strike rate towards listings, for me, a lot of times it's about the quality, not the volume in this part of our businesses.
And often we forget that in sales, is that pre-qualification. What do you think that biggest lesson is for other agents listening in on this now? I mean, we've talked about conversion rate. Is there anything else that Andrew felt was a game changer for him in this process?
I think that for businesses out there, I think I'm a big believer in role playing and practicing and refining your skills. And I think a lot of people don't do enough of that. We're going in, we're sitting in front of people who make a big decision maybe once or twice in their life, and we just don't give that enough importance. And I say to people all the time, you're either going to be in this industry, you're either a generalist or you're a specialist. I think this part of our business, if you want to be a specialist, we talk about this inside our training program, He said, look at all the core components we teach and practice it and role play it. So that by the time you're sitting in front of your potential client, you're more than likely to be confident, and they're going to see that when you're in front of them rather than feeling like they're interviewing you.
Absolutely. If Andrew was speaking to other principals right now, if he was in front of this camera right now, what do you think he'd say about implementing this system?
He'd say, slow it down, follow the process. And I'll talk about it in our systems all the time. There's a system that I believe that the implementation part is easy to follow. And I think that's what he'd say. Follow the process. He's got clear evidence inside his business now. And he's a guy who's got aspirations to go well above $1 million, and he can now see that he doesn't need to go out and do more work. He just needs to slow it down and improve the quality of his business. And I think if people do that, you're going to be able to win a lot more business than you think.